Good. Now, I'll write the full story. Completely new characters, new scenario, same formula. I came back from the gift shop to find my daughter and her husband standing too close together, talking in the way people talk when they don't want to be overheard. Heads down, shoulders angled inward. The kind of conversation that stops the second another person gets within range. They didn't hear me coming. I was still 20 feet away when I saw it. My daughter's hand squeezing her husband's wrist once, quick and firm, the way you squeeze someone's arm when you're reminding them to stay quiet. I slowed my steps, kept my face neutral. "Everything okay?" I asked, settling back into my seat at gate C9. My daughter, Celeste, looked up first. Her smile arrived too fast. "Practiced. Of course, Mama. Just talking about the drive home from the airport." Her husband, Troy, didn't look up at all. He scrolled his phone with the concentration of a man who has nothing to say and needs the screen to prove it. I was 63 years old. I'd spent 22 years running a home healthcare agency in Charlotte, North Carolina, building it from a kitchen table and a prayer into a company with 80 employees. I'd negotiated contracts with hospital systems that thought a woman my age and size was someone they could undercut. I'd raised Celeste alone after her father left when she was 9. I did not get to where I was by ignoring the feeling in my chest that said something is wrong. We had 45 minutes before our flight home. The cruise had been Celeste's idea. 7 days in the Bahamas, the 3 of us, a gift to celebrate my retirement. She'd insisted. Said I needed rest after selling the agency. Said Troy had already booked it, already paid, already arranged everything. I should have thought more carefully about a man who was suddenly so eager to arrange everything. The terminal at Nassau Linden Pendling International was warm and busy. Families dragging roller bags, couples studying departure boards, cruise passengers looking sunburned and contented. I watched Celeste refold her boarding pass. She'd done it 5 times in the last hour. Over and over, the paper getting soft at the creases, her hands needing something to do. "I'm going to find a bottle of water," I said. "You two want anything?" Troy finally looked up. He'd already reached into his back pocket. "Here." He pressed 2 folded 20s into my hand. "Get us all something, whatever looks good." I looked at the money, $40. Something about the gesture felt transactional. Final. "I'll be right back," I said. The airport shop was 3 gates down. I took my time, the way you do when you're trying to slow your own heartbeat enough to think clearly. I bought 3 waters, a bag of mixed nuts, and a key lime cookie that looked good enough to be worth the $4. The line was long, a tour group paying separately, each person with their own cash. I waited, thinking about the way Troy's hand came out of his pocket so fast, like he'd been holding that money ready. I was gone maybe 20 minutes. Gate C9 was empty. Not just them. The whole cluster of seats where we'd been sitting. Their bags, Celeste's carry-on tote she'd carried since college, Troy's leather duffel, gone. Other passengers sat in the surrounding chairs, reading and scrolling, unbothered, belonging somewhere. I stood holding the bag of snacks for 3 seconds before I understood. Then I turned to my backpack. Unzipped the main compartment. My spare sweater was there, sunscreen, travel umbrella. I went to the inner pocket where I always kept my passport. My hands already knew what they'd find. Empty. Side pocket, my phone. Gone. Front zipper, my wallet. Gone. I checked everything twice, then a 3rd time, the way your hands keep checking even when your brain already knows. Then I picked up the snack bag and walked to the gate counter. The agent was young, early 20s, with braids and an airline lanyard. She looked up with the polished pleasantness of someone trained to handle upset passengers. "The family that was sitting in seats 11 through 13, I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. A woman about 40, light-skinned, wearing a blue linen shirt. Man about the same age. "Did you see where they went?" she typed. Her eyes scanned a screen. "Washington party, 3 passengers. Yes, that's my family. They boarded the 1015 to Atlanta. Standby upgrade. Departed 22 minutes ago. I put both hands flat on the counter. We were flying to Charlotte. Together, on the 250. Yes, ma'am, they rebooked. She paused. I'm sorry. Atlanta, not Charlotte. A different city, a different direction, a connection point that would take them somewhere I couldn't follow without a passport or a phone or a dollar beyond what was already in my pocket. I looked down. I still had the $40 Troy had given me, still crisp, as if just pressed. He'd given me money to get rid of me. He gave me just enough to feel like help, and just enough time to board a plane to somewhere else. I walked back to the empty seats and sat down. The cookie was still in the bag. I'd paid $4 for it. I remember thinking, I shouldn't waste it. I ate the whole thing, sitting alone in the Nassau airport, while the reality of what my daughter had done arranged itself in my mind, like furniture being moved into a room. Every piece going exactly where it needed to go, every piece confirming what I already knew. My name is Miriam Hayes. I'm 63 years old. I built something from nothing once. I was going to have to do it again. The airport security office was cool and fluorescent lit. The officer who took my report was a Bahamian man named Officer Roll, patient and methodical, who wrote everything down by hand in a spiral notebook while I talked. He gave me a case number and the address of the nearest U.S. consular office. He did not seem surprised. That was the part that stayed with me walking out, that a man who worked in an international airport was not surprised by what a daughter had done to her mother. I walked out into Nassau heat with no phone, no ID, no bank card, $36 left after the snacks, a case number, and the address of the consular office written on a slip of paper. The woman at the front desk of the U.S. consular agency had reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and the careful eyes of someone who'd spent decades sorting real trouble from manufactured trouble. Her nameplate said, Consular Officer Sandra Okafor. She listened to me the way good listeners do, without interrupting, without performing sympathy, just taking it in. When I finished, she said, Your daughter took your passport. Yes. And her husband initiated the cash handoff to get you away from the gate. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached for a form. How much cash do you have? $36. She didn't react to that number, just wrote it down. Then she excused herself and came back 15 minutes later with paperwork and a number that changed everything. $650 from an emergency assistance fund, repayable when I got home, no timeline attached. How do I pay it back? I asked. Through the embassy website. Most people do it within 6 months. She handed me the forms. You'll pay it back. I looked at her. How do you know? 23 years at this desk. I've learned to tell. She looked at me over the glasses. What your daughter did. I've seen a lot of things. That's still one of the worst. She paused. You're not falling apart. That matters. She was right that I wasn't falling apart. What I was doing was something different. I was going back through every conversation of the past year, pulling each memory up and examining it. The way you examine old receipts, looking for what you missed the first time. I found plenty. 8 months ago, Celeste had started calling more often. Not her usual twice-a-week calls. Daily calls, warm and attentive, the kind of attentiveness I'd been quietly hungry for since I sold the agency and suddenly had no structure to the days. She wanted to help me organize my finances, said it would be easier to consolidate everything now that I was retired, simplify the accounts, set up automatic transfers. She'd brought paperwork to my kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon in October. Printed documents, official-looking language. Mama, this is just estate planning. Making sure everything transfers smoothly if something happens to you. She'd pointed at the signature line. This designates me as the financial power of attorney. Standard. Every retired person needs this. I'd signed. I trusted my daughter. I did not read every page. I sat in the Nassau consular office with the emergency cash in my hand and understood that I did not know what I had signed. A woman named Josephine helped me find a guest house. She worked behind the snack counter near the consular office, mid-40s, with a kind face and the manner of someone who'd seen her share of trouble and decided to be the person who helped anyway. She drove me there in a car that rattled but ran, and refused the $20 I tried to give her. My mother got stranded once, she said. Someone helped her, That's how it works. The guest house cost $28 a night. My room had a ceiling fan and a window that overlooked a courtyard where bougainvillea grew in unruly pink masses. That first night, I borrowed the guest house phone and called my own home number. Celeste and Troy had been living with me for 14 months. They'd moved in after Troy's landscaping business ran into trouble, and I'd said yes because she was my daughter and because the house was too quiet since I'd retired and because I thought I knew who my daughter was. The phone rang and rang. I called my neighbour, Eunice, 3 houses down. We'd known each other for 19 years. She picked up on the second ring. "Miriam?" She sounded startled. "Are you home? I saw Celeste and Troy loading a truck this morning." "What kind of truck?" "Moving truck. Big one. Early, maybe 6:30. I waved, but Troy didn't wave back. "I thought maybe you all came back early from the trip and were rearranging furniture or something." She paused. "Miriam, what's going on? What did they take?" Silence. Then carefully, "The big furniture." "The bedroom set in the guest room. Your mother's hutch from the dining room. Some boxes. A lot of boxes." Another pause. "Are you all right?" I was not all right, but I understood my situation clearly, which is a different thing. I thanked Eunice, told her not to say anything to Celeste if she called, hung up. I lay on the narrow guest house mattress and looked at the ceiling fan turning slow circles and let the full architecture of it take shape. Celeste needed money. That much was obvious. Troy's business had been failing longer and harder than she'd admitted. They'd moved into my house under the pretense of a rough patch. They'd used 14 months of rent-free living to research what came next. Somewhere in those documents I'd signed at my kitchen table, there was something that gave Celeste access to my accounts, my assets, possibly my house. She needed me gone long enough to use it. I had the emergency cash, a temporary roof, a borrowed phone, and the kind of clarity that only arrives when everything you thought was solid turns out not to be. I started making a list. It was what I'd always done before board meetings, before difficult negotiations, before any situation where I needed to be smarter than the people who thought they had the advantage. Document everything. Get home fast. Find out what I signed. Get a lawyer. Change the locks. Don't let anger make me sloppy. The emergency passport took 3 business days. I spent those days in Nassau, filing the police report, gathering statements, writing down every detail I could remember about the October signing. I borrowed Josephine's laptop for an hour each afternoon and researched financial power of attorney fraud. I researched elder financial abuse statutes in North Carolina. I found the name of an attorney, Brenda Caldwell, Charlotte, specializing in elder law and fraudulent asset transfers. I also called my bank from the guest house phone. "This is Miriam Hayes, account ending in 48892. I need a full transaction summary for the last 60 days. The representative read me the list. 7 transactions I didn't recognize. 6 transfers to an external account ranging from $4,000 to $11,000. 1 transfer dated 3 weeks ago for $22,000. Total moved $57,400. I kept my voice level. I need to flag all of those as unauthorized and freeze the account immediately. There was a pause. "Mrs. Hayes, are you the primary account holder?" "I am." "And I am the only authorized account holder?" "I am." "And I am the only authorized account holder. Whatever documentation suggests otherwise was obtained fraudulently. I want this account frozen, all pending transfers reversed if possible, and a fraud case opened. Now, please." I stayed on the phone for 45 minutes. By the end, the account was frozen and a fraud investigator's name was attached to my file. $57,400 gone, possibly unrecoverable, but no more going out. The emergency passport arrived on a Thursday morning, thin and temporary, but legal. I booked the first available flight to Charlotte. Economy, window seat. I watched Nassau get small beneath the plane, and I thought about Celeste at 9 years old, the year her father left, how she'd climbed into my bed every night for 3 months, and I'd let her because I understood that children need a place where the world can't get to them. I had been that place. For 31 years, I had been that place. The wheels touched Charlotte Douglas at 4:17 in the afternoon. I was home. Celeste didn't know that yet. My neighbour Eunice was waiting. I'd asked her to park down the block rather than in front of my house, and she'd done it without asking why, which is what 19 years of friendship looks like. She hugged me in the parking garage and then drove me to my own street and parked at the corner. My house looked the same from the outside. White two-story colonial on a quiet street in Dilworth, the neighbourhood I'd moved into the year after I got the first hospital contract. Mature oak trees. A garden I'd been tending for 15 years, worth $720,000 according to the Zillow estimate I'd checked from the guest house laptop. A car I didn't recognise sat in my driveway. "That's been there 2 days," Eunice said quietly. "I don't know whose it is." I used the spare key from Eunice's junk drawer. I'd given it to her years ago, forgotten about it, never asked for it back. Let myself in through the back door. The security code still worked. That told me something. They hadn't changed it yet. Either they hadn't thought of it, or they weren't planning to stay, or they weren't expecting me back. The dining room hutch was gone. I already knew that from Eunice's description. What I hadn't known, the curio cabinet from the living room, gone. The oil painting my mother had bought in New Orleans in 1987, gone. The silver frame collection from the staircase wall, 12 frames, all with family photos, gone. The frames taken, the photos left in a pile on the floor like they didn't matter. My mother's china, which had survived a move from Mississippi to Charlotte in the back of a rented van in 1962, and which I had wrapped in dish towels every time we moved, and which Celeste had always known was untouchable, gone. I stood in the kitchen doorway, looking at the space where the hutch had been, at the pale rectangle on the wall where the paint was slightly brighter, protected from years of fading, and I understood that my daughter had taken the things she knew I valued most. Not randomly. Specifically, she knew exactly what mattered to me because she had sat in this house and watched me love those things for 31 years. On the kitchen counter, centered deliberately, was a manila folder. Inside, a financial power of attorney document dated October 14th, bearing my signature, the designated agent, Celeste Marie Hayes-Odom. Powers granted, complete authority over all financial accounts, real property, investments, and assets. It did not expire. It did not require my incapacitation. I'd signed it because she said it was standard estate planning. Because I trusted her. Because I was 63 and newly retired and a little lonely, and she brought turkey sandwiches from the deli I liked, and we'd sat at this kitchen table and talked about her childhood, and I'd been happy for the afternoon. I photographed every page of the document. Then I photographed the empty wall where the hutch had been, the bare staircase, the missing painting, the pile of photographs on the floor like discarded evidence of a life. I called Brenda Caldwell from my new prepaid phone. It was 5:45 in the evening. Her office was closed. I left a message, my name, my situation, in 3 sentences, my callback number. She called back in 11 minutes. "Tell me what you signed," she said. I told her. She listened without interrupting, the way good lawyers do. "The power of attorney can be revoked," she said, "immediately and unilaterally, as long as you're competent, which you clearly are. We file a revocation today. Tomorrow we file a complaint with the North Carolina State Bar if an attorney helped draft that document, knowing you were being deceived. And we pursue civil recovery for every dollar transferred. What are my chances of getting the money back?" A pause. "Depends on where it went. If it's still in an account, good. If it's been spent, harder. But your daughter and son-in-law have assets. We can pursue those." Another pause. "Mrs. Hayes, what they did constitutes elder financial abuse under North Carolina law. That's criminal, not just civil. You can file criminal charges." "I know," I said. "I want to." The locksmith came the following morning, a methodical man named Roy, grey-haired, who changed every lock in the house without comment and tested each one twice. He charged me $290, worth every dollar. That afternoon, Eunice sat with me while I went through the rest of the house, room by room, cataloguing what was missing, what remained, what had been moved. I photographed everything, made a typed list on Eunice's laptop, serial numbers for the electronics, descriptions of the jewellery, approximate values, dates acquired. The list ran 4 pages. Then I waited. Celeste didn't know I was home. She thought her mother was still in Nassau, working through bureaucratic delays, out of money, out of options. She was wrong about all of it. She came on a Wednesday. I heard the car in the driveway just after noon, watched from the upstairs window as she got out alone. Troy wasn't with her, and walked to the front door with the key extended, already reaching for the lock. She wore sunglasses and carried a large, empty tote bag. She was planning to take more things. The key didn't work. I watched her try it 3 times, then step back and stare at the door. She pulled out her phone. I didn't know who she called, but the call lasted about 2 minutes. Then she walked around to the back. The bat lock didn't work either. She stood in the backyard for a moment, looking at the house, and I could see from the upstairs window the exact moment she understood. I went downstairs, opened the front door before she rang the bell. She came around the corner of the house and stopped when she saw me. Behind the sunglasses, I couldn't read her eyes, but her whole body changed, a slight stiffening, the way people brace themselves when the thing they hoped hadn't happened turns out to have happened. "Mama." Her voice was careful, measured. "You're home." "I'm home." "I've been trying to reach you. You didn't answer your phone." "You have my phone, Celeste." Silence. "Come inside," I said. Not an invitation. An instruction. She came. I stepped back to let her in, and she walked into the living room and looked at the coffee table, which held the power of attorney document, the bank fraud report, a printed list of missing items, and Brenda Caldwell's business card, facing out so the name was readable. Celeste looked at all of it. Then she looked at me. "Where's Troy?" I asked. "He's not. He didn't come." "But you told him to come. You planned for both of you to come here today." She didn't answer. Which was an answer. I sat down in the armchair across from the couch the way I used to sit in difficult business meetings, back straight, hands in my lap, completely still. "Sit down." She sat. "I want to understand," I said. "Not to forgive right now, just to understand," I said. "Not to forgive right now, just to understand. When did you decide to do this?" She was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then, "February." "Why February?" Her jaw moved. She'd taken off the sunglasses. Her eyes were her father's eyes, the same shape, the same deep brown, and it cost me something to look at them directly. Troy owed money to people who weren't patient about it, not a bank, not a credit card company. She stopped. "How much?" $80,000. I kept my face still. "And you thought my money would cover it." "I thought," she stopped again, "I thought you'd say no if I asked. I thought you'd give me a lecture about Troy, about his choices, about how you'd warned me." Her voice went flat. "You've been warning me about Troy for 6 years, Mama." I didn't want to hear it again, so instead of asking, "You stole," she flinched. "I know how it looks. Celeste, I'm not asking how it looks. I'm asking you to say what it is." She was quiet for a moment. "We stole from you." I sat with that. Let it mean what it meant. "The things from the house, where are they?" "Storage unit." "Troy has the key." "Everything?" "Everything." I nodded. "My attorney is filing a revocation of the power of attorney today. The bank has already flagged all transactions as fraudulent. I filed a police report in Nassau, and I'm filing one here tomorrow. I need you to tell Troy to open that storage unit voluntarily, because the alternative is a search warrant and a criminal charge for both of you." She was crying now, quietly, the way people cry when they know they've reached the end of something. "Are you going to have us arrested?" I thought about 9-year-old Celeste climbing into my bed after her father left. I thought about my mother's china on a truck somewhere. I thought about $57,400 moving out of my account in 6 transactions while I was planning a cruise I thought was a gift. "I'm going to hold you accountable," I said. "That's not the same thing as revenge, but it's also not the same thing as letting it go." Brenda Caldwell was everything I'd hoped for. methodical, precise, and specifically angry in the way that good lawyers get angry when the facts warrant it. She filed the power of attorney revocation within hours of our first conversation. She filed the civil suit for recovery of transferred funds the following week. She connected me with Detective Phyllis Moore at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, who specialized in financial crimes. Detective Moore was a compact woman in her 40s with a measuring way of looking at people. She took my statement over 2 hours, asked questions I hadn't thought to ask myself, and by the end had a clearer picture of the scheme than I did. "Your son-in-law almost certainly drove this," she said, not as comfort, but as analysis. "The debt was his, the contacts, the timeline, but your daughter executed it, and that makes her equally liable." Troy had been sloppy. The storage unit was in his name. The external accounts where my money had transferred traced back to a joint account he and Celeste held at a bank I'd never heard of. 3 weeks after the money arrived, $40,000 of it moved again to a private account Detective Moore identified within 48 hours as belonging to a man with a documented history of loan sharking in the Greater Charlotte area. So the money was mostly gone. The loan shark had been paid. What remained, $17,400, still sitting in the joint account, now frozen by court order. The stolen items, recovered intact from the storage unit after Troy, faced with a search warrant and Detective Moore's particular manner of explaining consequences, agreed to hand over the key. I sat in Brenda's office when they brought back my mother's china. The movers set the boxes on my dining room table and I opened each one myself, unwrapping pieces I'd wrapped myself 15 years ago when I moved into this house. Every piece intact, every piece there. My mother had carried this china from Mississippi when she was 26 years old, believing that beautiful things were worth protecting, even when money was short. She was right. Some things are worth the cost of protection. The case resolved 6 months later. Troy pled guilty to 1 count of financial exploitation of an elder adult, 18 months of probation, restitution order for the full $57,400, a judgment that would follow him for decades even if it took decades to collect. Celeste pled to a lesser charge, no contest, in exchange for full cooperation with the investigation. Probation, community service, restitution jointly with Troy. She called me the day before the plea hearing. I answered because I'd decided I would always answer. That was a boundary I'd set for myself, not for her. "I'm sorry, Mama." Her voice was small. "I know that it doesn't fix anything," I said, "but I hear you. Are you ever going to forgive me?" I thought about it, really thought, the way I'd been trying to think about everything since Nassau, clearly, without the comfort of easy answers. "I don't know yet," I said. "I know I'm not going to carry this around as hate, that's too heavy, but forgiveness is something else. I'll let you know when I get there." She didn't say anything. Neither did I. After a moment, I heard her crying and I let her. January. A cold Saturday, the kind Charlotte gets a few times a year, bright and sharp frost on the grass. I was in the garden with work gloves and a trowel, doing the kind of slow, satisfying work that asks nothing of you except attention. Eunice was on her porch across the street with coffee, calling out occasional comments about my technique that I ignored cheerfully. The hutch was back in the dining room. I'd found a refinisher who repaired a scratch Troy's movers had left on the side. I watched her work for an hour, fascinated by the patience required. The oil painting was back on the wall. The silver frames were back on the staircase with the photographs replaced. Each of these returns felt like a small ceremony. My bank balance was $57,400 lighter. Some of it would come back over years through the restitution order. Some of it probably wouldn't. I'd adjusted my retirement projections accordingly, tightened certain plans, abandoned others. Not comfortably, but manageably. I'd built a business from a kitchen table. I knew how to manage with less than expected. Eunice called across the street. "You missed a spot." "Mind your business, Eunice," she laughed. So did I. Some days I thought about Celeste in the small apartment she'd moved into after Troy they'd separated, which I didn't take satisfaction in, but didn't mourn either. I thought about her going to work, going to her community service hours, building back something like a life from the wreckage of what she'd done. I thought about whether she was eating well, whether she was sleeping, whether she was the woman I'd raised, somewhere underneath what desperation and a bad marriage had made her do. I didn't know yet. I was still finding out. What I knew, my house was mine. My locks worked. My mother's china was in the cabinet where it had always been. The oil painting from New Orleans was on the wall where my mother had imagined it would hang when she bought it. And I was still here. That mattered. At 63 years old, living alone on a quiet street in Dilworth, gardening on a January Saturday while my neighbour criticised my technique, I was still here. Eunice came down from her porch eventually, brought a second cup of coffee, and we sat on my front steps in the cold, watching the street. A woman jogged past with a dog. 2 kids rode bikes. A delivery truck made its slow way down the block. "You ever think about moving?" Eunice asked. "Somewhere smaller, easier?" "I thought about it," I said. "For about 5 minutes in Nassau. And I looked at the house, the white paint, the oak tree in the yard, the garden I'd been tending for 15 years. The place I'd built my life and defended my life and was still, on a cold January morning, living my life. And then I stopped thinking about it," I said. Eunice handed me the coffee. We sat there until it got too cold to sit, which took longer than you'd expect, because some places are worth staying in, even in winter, even after everything. Especially after everything. I used to think betrayal had to be loud to be real. A slammed door, a shouted accusation, something you could point to and say, "That's the moment." But what Celeste did was quiet, planned, carried out over months with turkey sandwiches and Sunday afternoon conversations and the laptop already open on the kitchen table. The quietest betrayals are the ones that take the longest to see coming and the longest to recover from. I've thought a lot about what made it possible, not just what Celeste did, but what allowed it. I trusted her completely. I signed a document I didn't read because I couldn't imagine needing to read it. That's the truth I had to sit with alone in a Nassau guest house with a ceiling fan turning overhead. That love, when it isn't paired with clear eyes, can become a door you leave unlocked for the wrong people. That's not a comfortable thought about your own child, but it's an honest one, and I've decided I'd rather have honest thoughts than comfortable ones. What I learned in those days away from home wasn't about my daughter. It was about myself. I learned that the same part of me that built a business from a kitchen table, the part that makes lists, thinks clearly under pressure, refuses to be dismissed, that part doesn't retire. I thought I'd left it at the agency when I signed the sale papers, but it was still there. It woke up in that airport when the gate agent said the words "departed 22 minutes ago," and it didn't go back to sleep. There's something about being stripped of everything, no phone, no ID, no money, no one who knows where you are, that either breaks you or clarifies you. I found out I was the second kind, not because I'm exceptional, because I'd spent 63 years practicing, even when I didn't know I was practicing. Every difficult negotiation, every time a bank manager looked at me like I didn't belong in that chair, every year I raised Celeste alone and kept going anyway. All of it was practice for the moment I needed to make a plan in a foreign airport with $36 in my pocket. People asked me, not often, but sometimes, whether I regret pressing charges, whether I think it was too hard on Celeste, and I understand why they ask. She's my daughter. I carried her. I watched her sleep. The love doesn't disappear because of what she did. But love without accountability isn't love. It's just tolerance. And tolerance of harm teaches people that harm is acceptable. I didn't want to teach my daughter that. I wanted to teach her the same thing I'd spent 30 years trying to teach her with my example. That actions have weight, that choices have consequences, and that the measure of a person isn't whether they stumble, but whether they face what they've done. The hardest wisdom is the kind that costs something. What Celeste did cost me $57,400 and 6 months of legal work, and a grief I still carry, and probably always will. What I chose to do in response cost her more. That's not satisfaction. That's just how it works when you finally stop absorbing consequences that aren't yours to carry. My mother's china is back in the cabinet. The oil painting is back on the wall. I'm back in my garden on Saturday mornings with Eunice calling unsolicited advice from across the street. Life returned to itself. But I returned to it differently, with clearer eyes, a better locked door, and the hard-earned knowledge that the most important thing I protected in all of this wasn't my house. It was my own sense of what I'm worth.